Excellent. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to cover UVing. We're going to cover preparing things for Substance Painter, putting things in Substance Painter, and an explanation of how baking works and a little bit of explanation of painting. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover. I'm going to be talking a little bit quickly, and I'm going to try to be as efficient as possible explaining this to you. That's why we have this recording as well, because you're going to look over it more than once, I expect, if you do not understand the things that I'm explaining. And at the end, we're probably going to go right up to 12 o'clock or maybe even a little after, but I'll be around if you have questions. So let's get started. So what you have here is you have the robot that I essentially optimized. So here I have the very detailed version that has a lot of it's not been optimized too much. It's got a lot of lines and stuff. All of these are very a little bit high resolution. And what I did after this section where I essentially finished the model in terms of its detail, relatively good detail modeling, I optimized it. So this is a more optimized version where there's less lines and it is lower in density. So if we go to our display, heads-up display, poly count, you're going to see that this version is about 8,000 and this version is 10,000. So I got to shave off about 2,000 polygons off this guy. You might say that's not a lot, but let's imagine this is a game where I have 15 of these guys on the screen at the same time. That's essentially saving about 30,000 polygons per 15 of these, or something like that. I'm not calculating it very well, but it's saving a lot of polys if you have a lot of them, which is great. Okay, so what's the next step after optimizing it? And you kind of have this finished, optimized version that's kind of essentially the resolution that you're going to put into a video game. Now we have to UV it. And UVing is the process of creating a 2D version of the model that's been cut up into pieces and flattened out on a table. So let me just try and put this whole thing on the side here. It's a little easier for everyone, including me. Where did it go? Where did it go? It disappeared. Give me a sec. Let's open up our UV editor. There we go. And we'll put this on the side as well over here. Trying to fit it in. There we go, almost. Come on. There we go. Got it. Jesus. And UV editor, we want this to be on the end here. There we go, just like that. That's what we wanted. So this here, you go for UV at the top here, and you go to UV editor, and this is going to open up this window here, the UV editor. And it's going to open up an extra toolkit here as well. We're going to hide that for a second because we don't want to see it. And it's going to open up this window here. This is a UV editor. So anytime you have an object in your scene, whatever that object is, that object may or may not have a flattened, cut up and flattened 2D version of itself in this UV window. And what essentially this is a part of your model. This is it reading how this model would have textures put on it. It's literally a flattened piece of your model. So if I open up a Google thing, I just want to show you BoxNet. Right, so remember in school you used to do this sort of thing, and you used to make a box out of, a net. So this is pretty much the same thing, except for really complex objects. You're cutting it up and flattening it out again, as if it's kind of like a paper craft or whatever you call it. But it doesn't have to just be a cube. You can do this for any kind of 3D object. By default, all the UVs are pretty much broken. They're just messed up. They're not accurate. And what we want them to look like is like this, like cut up and flattened out, very even and accurate layouts of the 3D model in its 2D form, right? So this is going to be important, and I'll explain why in a moment, but bear with me for now. So in order to do this, essentially I take my final model, and I duplicate it, and essentially I remove anything extra that's in this model. I remove anything that's additional. So anything that's double up. So for example, I have one antenna, I have a second antenna. They're exactly the same, so I'm going to remove it. I have the main leg here, and all of these are just copies of it, so I'm going to remove it. So essentially, I remove everything that's a copy. Even on the bottom here, this little extra little piece, I'm going to remove it because it's just a copy from the other side. I do this because instead of UVing every single duplicate of the model that I have, I can just UV one side and then copy paste it to the other side, and it's going to have the same texture. It's going to have the same UVs. I don't need to UV the same object multiple times. I just UV it once and then just copy paste it one more time. And after I get it to this stage, I go through the UV process. And let me just show you what the end result is going to look like. So this is a finished UV for my little robot here, this little guy that's in the back here. And this is what the finished UVs for it look like. Now, it might look a little bit crazy, but I assure you that it's not so complicated. And up here in this UV editor, you have a few different tools that help you see what you're actually working on, and they're all kind of at the top here. There's first two really useful. You have your normal lines, and you can have highlighted lines which are blue, and this is very useful, so you can see a little bit clearly what all the different shapes are. And also here on the end, you have this little checker box, which is going to put a texture on your object to see kind of what the actual colors are going to look like in terms of resolution when you put them on there. Okay, so how do we get to this point? How do we get to a point where you essentially have all these finished, cut up sections of this very complex object here? Okay, so listen up. This is going to be me explaining to you the UV process. And this is a step-by-step process which you're going to need to follow to UV things accurately. Some people go to game courses where for 3 years they are not taught a proper way to UV 3D models. So please pay attention to this because it's very useful. So the first thing that you do is you select everything, or if you want to, hide everything that you don't want to UV and work just on sections to begin with. I'm going to select everything because I like to be very efficient. Select everything, and I go to the UV editor here, and I click this Planar button. And what this is going to do, it's going to essentially create this kind of box that's the size of the model, and it's going to just scan the model from left to right. And it's going to scan it, and it's going to take all of that information and put it into the 2D version. And right now we have essentially a scan of the entire model in 2D, in the 2D version. The problem is that it's not cut into pieces. It's literally a 3D object placed in here. It's not cut up. It's not flattened. So for example, if I take a cube and I open it up a little and I do the same thing, and I go UV and I click Planar, it's going to do that little scan, and it looks, oh, it's a square. It's just not. But it's not, because if I rotate this like this, and I do that again, and I go UV Planar, you see what it's doing, it's just taking the whole object without cutting it into pieces and putting it in this 2D view. And I'm just going to show you very quickly, if I kind of try and move these faces away so that they're cut up, they're not, they're all together. So I'm not actually able to do that. So the first thing we have to do is that we have to grab everything and just scan it in by doing UV Planar. And the second thing we're going to do, we're going to look at it from a little angle. We're going to still have everything selected. Grab everything, have everything selected, and we're going to go UV camera-based. And what this is going to do, it's going to do the exact same scan, but from the direction of your camera. And when you click it, it's going to do this. And it's going to look crazy, and you're going to be like, what the hell just happened? But the reason it looks like this is because it's done it for every single object individually. So if you grab your object selection mode and click on one object, you're going to see that all it's done is scan it and fit it to this square. And every object you click on, you can see it scanned it from your camera's perspective and put it in this position. Now, this is very useful because you can start making the UVs for each object individually from now on. So I can literally hide everything and just work on one piece at a time and very clearly see what I have available here and start working on it in the UV editor. And I'm going to start explaining to you how the UV editor works in a moment. Let's just make all this visible again. And I'm going to explain how the UV editor works on a slightly more complex square shape. So let me make this long. Let me put in a couple of edge loops. And let me extrude one side like this. Okay, let's delete all our history. And let's then freeze transformation as well. Okay, so let's go through the same process. We're going to go UV planar, so it scans it in. You can see it's got like this little middle bit where it's been scanning it. And then we go UV camera based, so it does it from our camera's perspective. And now we have like the whole 3D object in this 2D view. And this 2D information is part of the 3D object. They are linked. You can see as I'm mousing over this 3D object, it's mousing over here. But you'll notice when I edit the 3D object, it does not edit the 2D object and vice versa. That's because this is simply a representation of this 3D object, and it can be manipulated. The representation can be manipulated. And what we want to do is we want to cut this thing here into pieces, as if we're just breaking up a box of a paper box, right? So the way you do that is you go in here and you select edges on your model that you want to cut into pieces. And I'm going to select all the edges on the front of this object like this. And in here, in my UV editor, I'm going to go up here to this menu. You're going to be using this menu all the time. It's called Cut and Sew. You click Cut and Sew, and here you have a little option called Split. And what Split does, it literally splits the edges you have selected. So I'm going to click that, and you're going to see they're going to highlight now. And what that means is that they have actually been split away from the other faces. So if I grab my face selection now and I move one, you can see it's moving away. But you're going to be like, okay, so I can select faces and vertices in here and edges like I can in my normal view. But when I do, it kind of like breaks the object. It's not the same object. I just want to select this whole section I just cut out. So the way you do that is you right-click and you go to UV shell. And a UV shell is an entire separate section of UVs, an entire separate section of information like this. So now you see I'm literally breaking it up into pieces and moving those pieces apart from each other. I'm not changing the shape of the object. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut off, excuse me, this side as well, just so it's flat. And I'm going to go to Cut and Sew Split, and I'm going to grab that UV shell as well. Now I have this section as well, and now I have this piece here, and you'll notice that there's blue bits and there's red bits. That's the difference between these two view modes. This is just going to show you the lines. This view mode here is going to show you the blue bits and the red bits. The red bits are facing the wrong way, essentially. They're the inside of your model. Remember when I was showing you, oh, if you cut into a model, the inside is going to be black because it's the wrong side of the face. So essentially, everything that's red means we're looking at the inside of the shape, not the outside, you know? So if I select this shape here, this is the outside of it. It says if I select this shape here, I'm looking at it from the other end. I'm looking at it from the inside, you know? Anyway, don't want to confuse you guys too much on that topic. But let's just carry on. So I've cut it up, and what's the... Did I delete that by accident? Oh, there we go. So what do you do next? We've cut this up into pieces. We have the middle bit, we have the front bit, and the back bit. What do we do now? Now you have to make them unfold. You have to make them perfectly optimized in shape. And the way you do that is very, very simple. Let's just select one of these shells. And let's go to, we're done with the cutting and the sewing now. We're done with that for now. So we're going to go to the modify menu now. And this is the second one that you're going to use the most. It's got all of these things, but you don't have to worry about any of them right now except for two. And the first one is called unfold. And unfold is right at the bottom here. And when you click that, it's going to unfold the object. It's going to straighten it out. It's going to make it the perfect, exact proportion of the actual object here as much as it possibly can. That's what it's going to do. So I've unfolded this front piece here, and now it's the perfect shape. You can see this one's a little stretched, and I can even kind of manipulate it a little and stretch it even more and kind of break it. But when I select it and go modify, unfold, it's going to perfect itself. It's going to fix itself. The only thing it's not going to do is rotate it and make it the right size. We're going to do that later. Now let's do it for this piece here and see the problem we're going to run into. So we have this piece going around, right? So let's go modify, unfold, and what is this, right? It's trying to flatten it, but because it's a round piece, you can't flatten a round piece that goes all the way around. It's like taking a tire and trying to flatten it against the ground, or taking a donut and trying to flatten it against the ground. It's going to stay round. We want these to get cut up into individual sections. So if I only just cut one piece here, I'm going to grab this piece here, and I'm just going to cut that. I'm going to split that. Okay, so now when I unfold it, go modify, unfold, it's straightened out. Just imagine this middle strip of faces going all the way around, right? Imagine it like an actual piece of paper. If you cut it, you can flatten it out in a line. So that's what we've done here. We've literally cut it here, and the rest, it's in the 2D space, flattened it out in a line. Now, I don't want it to be that long, so I'm going to cut it in a couple of other spaces as well. In here, and in here. So I'm going to go modify, cut and sew, split. Now I can select all of these. I can modify, unfold. They're already perfectly in line anyway, so I don't need to worry about that. But you can see that they're all separate pieces now. Now, alternatively, you don't have to do it one by one. I like to be efficient, so I'm just going to mess these up a little bit. What I like to do is I like to grab everything and go modify, unfold, and then if there's any problems or errors, I'll go in and fix them one by one. Okay, so now we've got this object's UVs all kind of cut up into pieces and made the right shape. And that's great, but they're not organized and they're not the right size to each other. So up here, remember this little checker box I was showing you? If you click that, it's going to show you a preview of what a texture is going to look like on your model. And right now you can see that your texture is not going to be completely straight. It's not going to be the same size either. So for example, if I grab this piece here and I just change the size to something much smaller, you can see that in the end, when you start putting pictures or textures or painting on your model, the resolution in terms of pixels is not going to be the same. This is what this is representing. This is what this checker box is representing. It's representing how your colors are going to come up, how your texture is going to come up here. And this is why we need all of these to be the proportionate size and organized neatly into this first initial square here. This is what we use to organize our UVs. Just this one little square here that's right in the middle of this big axis. This is all we use. So the way we do that is very simple. I'm going to turn this off for a second. We grab all of our shells, all of our UV shells, and we go to modify. And the second tool we use here, not unfold, the second tool we use is layout. So if I just click layout by default, all it's going to do is try and bunch them up together into this square. And that's okay. They're all in the square space now, and they're kind of an okay size, but it's still not perfect. They're still not arranged, and they're not necessarily going to be the exact size we want them. So we want to go to modify layout and click this extra little box here. This is your option box. Any tool you see here or in your mesh menu or anywhere, if you click the option box, you're going to get the option window come up for that tool, right? So we're going to open up our option box for the layout tool. And when we open up our option box, we have all this garbage. Don't worry about all of it right now. All you need to worry about is changing these two options here. Shell pre-rotation, we want to set that to vertical or horizontal. And your shell pre-scaling, we need to set it to UV ratio. So that means the scale ratio is going to be to each other. They're all going to be the right scale to each other. And then when we when we lay out the UVs, you can see they're going to actually be in a correct orientation and try to be the correct size. except if it can't figure it out, it can't calculate it quite right, and it's going to rotate this guy weirdly. Let's try that again. But let's tick this little rotate shells box, see if anything happens. No, I didn't manage to do it, so let's get rid of that option then. And what I do when I'm in this situation, I actually just grab them and rotate them myself as perfectly as I can. And there's some tools that help you do that, but I'm not going to talk about them right now. And we do this. And the most important thing is you don't want shells to be overlapping, and you don't want them to be sticking out of the square zone, right? And that's the tricky bit about UVing that you have to do. And sometimes it just kind of feels like a little game of Tetris, and that's exactly what it is sometimes, just a little game of Tetris. And sometimes some of them you have to rotate away different from the others just to make them fit, or you just make everything a little bit smaller to make it fit as much as you can. But you can see now that when I rotate these ones like that, I can fit everything else in this little space. Now, this isn't a very good UV because the most important thing about UVs is wasting as little space as possible. And right now, we're wasting quite a lot of space where we could put other things. But since this is just a random object, I'm not going to try and perfect these UVs just yet. Something you can do to help you make sure that it's not touching each other or the little hole is that when you are laying out your UVs, if you are going to do it just by the tool and not edit them by hand, in your layout options, you just add some padding. Padding is just space. You add 2 pixels of padding between the shells and between the edges. And now when you apply the UVs, you're going to see there's 2 pixels of padding in between here, and there's 2 pixels of padding in between there. And that's the little options you can do to help you out whilst you're laying out. But I'm just going to keep them like this. And now when I show my texture, you can see the cubes are perfectly oriented, perfect scale and everything. And these are the UVs that you would use for this object. So let's go back to our little robot, since we talked about this object for so much. Our little robot, as you remember, is a little crazy at the moment because every single object in this robot has its own kind of camera-based UVs, which is filling up the whole screen. And we want our final result to look like this, which is all of the UVs have been cut up and laid out together in one UV space. They're all the right scale. If I turn on the squares, you're going to see some of them are a little rotated, which is fine because they are allowed to be rotated a little if they have to be, but they're all roughly the right scale. We have a little bit of deformation here, which can happen when you have very circular objects, and that's also okay. It's not a big problem, as you can see. So this is kind of what we want to aim for, right? I'm going to go through just a little section of this robot to show you how to get to that, and I think I'm going to do it on the body, maybe the leg as well. So let's go one by one here. This is a cylinder. By default, I can just go in, because this is what this object looks like. It's just a little tube, right? So by default, I can just come in here and unfold it. But as you can see, it's going to glitch out. It's going to make it really weird because it needs to be cut into a strip. Imagine this is a piece of paper that you've glued in a circle. You need to cut it somewhere. So I'm going to cut it right at the back here. I'm going to go cut and sew split. And now I'm going to grab this object and unfold it one more time. And you can see it's going to go in a little strip like this. And it's going to look a lot better on the squares as well, which is what we want. This one is a little different because it has a cap. So before we do our cutting of the round bit, we need to cut off the cap. Let me turn this off for a bit. We need to cut off the cap. So I'm going to select the edges for the cap, and then I'm going to look at it from behind and select that edge as well. I like to cut them all up at once. Then we're going to go to modify, cut and sew, split. And you can see that they're highlighted because they've been split. I can select them all at the same time, modify, unfold. They both unfold the way they're supposed to be. Notice that I'm not trying to make them fit into the square yet, because I'm going to do that for all of them at the same time at the end. Now, this one is a little tricky because it's got no inside and it's got this thick bit here. So again, the first thing I have to do is cut up this cylindrical shape away from these kind of teeth. So I can just remove those first. So I can go split. This is a little more complicated object, so I'm going to do it more carefully. This strip of assets, this strip going along, I'm going to cut it at its sharp points because if you have very, very sharp edges, it's usually good to cut them away from the model. So let's do that. Split. And now you can see that this piece is separate from all of these pieces. And this piece at the top, I'm just going to cut, again, these very hard bits that we have here. I want them to be separate. And I'm going to cut it. So split. And I'm only going to cut the piece going around at the back here. Where exactly do I do it? It's here. I'm only going to cut this right here. I'm not going to cut it up here, and I'll show you why in a second. Because now I'm going to select everything, modify, unfold. Amazing. It does it all at once. It just unfolds all your assets at once. And the reason I only did, do you see how this is going all the way around this piece here? And by cutting it just in one side, it just flattens it out like that, like a strip. Excellent. But what about the other pieces? The other pieces are flattened. Yes, but they're looking from above. So this is kind of, this doesn't need to be cut up and unfolded and like stretched out. It's pretty much the right shape to begin with. And this one we can if we want to, but it can still be kind of just left like this and made flat a little bit more easily. So if I show you the squares, they're not looking too bad. They're not too deformed. They are a little bit stretching outwards, but it's not a big problem. If I wanted to, I could cut it up here and unfold it. But as you can see, it's not going to have the same effect. So I'm just going to reverse that. Okay, that's that piece done. And the middle piece is a round thing. So I would cut it up just like before into pieces. Split. Let's do our edge like this. Split. And then unfold everything. And ta-da. And it's working. These are a lot of cylindrical shapes, so they're done in a very similar way. The bottom one, I will do the same as the top one. I'm going to skip it for a second. This square shape, I would just cut into kind of either into every flat face, or I would kind of do it like a net. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I might leave this square bit exposed like that. And on the front here, I'll actually leave these open. So when I cut it now, you're going to see that my two pieces are kind of this piece and this piece that like was fitting underneath here. And I did that because when I unfold this, it's going to open up like that. Oops, we forgot a piece here. You can sew it as well. Sew. That, and we can do it to this one as well. And even though there's these hard edges here, you can still make it so that it unfolds if it's logical. You know, just think of that paper box example. Just imagine it's made of paper. How is the paper going to unfold? If I leave like a connection here, like, and I try to unfold it, it's going to like, how is the paper going to unfold once it's cut into pieces? Try and make it as efficient and logical as you can. Essentially, you just take 3D objects, you cut them up, and you flatten them out. This is a 2D version of your 3D object, and it's going to be used later on when we do the texturing. That's all this is. You're cutting it up and you're unfolding it. Last thing I'll show is if you have a long cylinder like this, you can cut off the caps, or if you have the caps there, you just split the caps as well. And all you need to do for something like this is cut it all the way down, and then when you unfold it, oops, sorry, wrong button. It's going to essentially cut it here and then unroll it and flatten it out like that. That's what that's going to do. It's just cutting it over and flattening it out. Now let me just grab all of these that we've done, except the bottom one, because I didn't do that one. All of these that we've done except the bottom one. I would grab this one, just as an example. And I would usually do the whole robot, not just these bits, but I just want to show you, we can then grab all of these UV shells, even though they're from separate objects, and we can go modify. We did the unfold. I can do unfold again for everything just to make sure. And then we go to layout. Our options are still saved, so I don't need to change them, but we can go modify, layout, and it's going to fit them all into the UV sheet. And then when I click on each individual object, you can see only it shows up. But when I select them all together, you're gonna see that they're all like fitting together in the UV sheet. And that's how I got to my whole robot having this entirely finished UV sheet here with all of its separate objects arranged in the space like this, right? That's how we got to this point. So this is what you're going to have to do after you finish detailing your asset. You're going to have to UV it one object piece at a time and then fit it all together into the same UV space. There's a lot of other details that go into this. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of tools that can help you, but those you will learn as you encounter the need for them. You don't need them right now. You can do it through just the simplified version of the method that I've just shown you. You select all of the objects, you give them a planar map, you then give them a camera-based map, and you go through each one by one, cutting them up and sewing them. That's the most basic method, the most efficient method to go through and UV game assets. So I'm gonna hold for a second because I'm gonna go into another topic that's linked to UVing and actually goes into Substance Painter just a little bit. I'm not gonna teach you Substance Painter right now, but I'm going to use it to explain why we need the UVs, why we have assets that are more high resolution and low resolution, and what we're doing with all of that. I'm gonna go into that in a moment, but right now, I'm just gonna, on my laptop that's on the side here, I'm gonna open up Discord. So if any of you have questions right now about what I covered that you don't think can be answered in the video when you rewatch it, ask me right now. Is there anything you want me to just clarify a little bit more, or if anything you think wasn't explained very clearly that you think isn't going to be answered when you rewatch the video, just ask straight away now.
Yeah, hi Steph.
Hello.
I was just wondering how you managed to do the fit all the UV mapping into one square again.
So,
Like modify layout.
yeah, so when you grab a UV of an object, let me do it on this guy. When you grab the UVs of any UVs you grab in the space, if you lay them out, they're going to try and fit into the square as perfectly as they can. So if you have one object that has multiple shells, you can lay them out and they're going to try and fit on the screen. If you have multiple objects, multiple of their UVs are going to show up into the screen. You can grab them and lay them out. And then when you select them individually, you're only going to see their UVs in separate places. And I'm going to explain why we do that in the next section.
So it's best to just unfold them all and then select them all and then press
Yeah,
layout.
that's why I do it. Like I literally do the planar for all of them, do the camera base for all of them, go through and cut up all of them, unfold them all, and then lay out them all. Just one step at a time, because that way you're really efficient and you're not task switching. You're not, using like 6 tools 50 times. You're using one tool a bunch and then one tool a bunch. It's just more efficient.
Yeah, alright, cool.
So one question that's in the chat regarding the UV mapping. What if you place the map on a certain part of the texture, however the texture does not look right where you place the map? What would you do to correct this? And also, would there be a need to mark seams and sharps? So if there are different techniques to texturing, and the technique to texturing that we're going to be using is going to be painting on the models after we have the UVs ready. We're not going to be putting the UVs on a picture that already exists. We're going to be painting the images directly onto the models. So we're not going to have to worry about whether putting the UV on a certain bit looks right. We're going to have to make sure our UVs aren't broken and don't have errors, but we're going to get into that when we're doing feedback sessions. In future, in fact, actually next semester, you're going to learn a little bit about trim sheets, and you're going to learn about how to create a texture before you do your UVs. But that's next semester. We're going to cover that. Right now, we're going to just focus on making sure our UVs don't have errors. And we're going to do that by just in the feedback sessions, looking at your UVs and kind of helping you fix any problems you run into. Okay. All right. So any other questions? You guys can fire them at me a little later. For now, I'm going to move on because there's a little bit more I want to cover. If we had like 3 hours, I would cover actually painting in Substance Painter as well, but I'm going to leave that for next week instead. For now, I just want to explain to you why these UVs exist, because UVs are hard to teach, not because the process is difficult. It's not, as you can see, it's literally click here, do this process, click here, do this process. It's hard for me to explain to you why we do them. Why is there this 2D version of a model for our thing here? So let's go back to this guy. You see I've UV'd the whole thing, right? It's all ready. And I'm not going to explain to you how I took it into Substance Painter yet. I'm just going to show you it's in Substance Painter. And this is me working on the model in Substance Painter and painting it and doing a lot of stuff. This is what it looked like by default. It was just this, let me just hide its face. It was just this little guy that had this default white texture covering all of it like this. This is all that we had. Let me just get rid of that as well. Yeah. So this is all that it came in as. Sorry. It was just this little gray guy with nothing on there. I just took that model that was UV'd in Maya, this guy, and I put it in Substance Painter where we color it and paint it and do all that stuff that we're going to go into later. And this is what it looks like. It's just this little guy. Now, let me show you. This program also has a 2D and a 3D viewport. So you can see both your object and its UVs at the same time. And what you do in Substance Painter is you create loads of different kinds of details, loads of different kinds of bits of information about how bright something is and where it has shininess and the colors and loads of stuff. And I'm just going to show you really, really briefly what something like that is. So I'm going to make a little color here. And don't worry about what I'm doing right now. Do not worry about how I'm using Substance Painter. That's not the important part. Just focus on what's happening to the model and what's happening to this 2D version here. So I can change, the color of the asset, and I can also change how shiny it is, and I can also change whether it's metallic or not, and I can also make this appear only on certain parts of the model, not all of the model. So I can even select parts. So I'm gonna select so it happens on these parts and these parts of the metal, all of that, and I can make that be, very shiny, whereas then I can make another color that's going to be much darker, and I can make that go on only other parts of the model that I can be like, oh, this is the rubber parts. They're made of rubber. And obviously because they're made of rubber, they're not going to be so shiny, and they're not going to be metallic, whereas this one is also going to be very metallic. I just need to admit someone into the thing. Also, I wasn't sharing the screen on Discord for a second there. I apologize. So you can see that on Substance, I can change a lot of things about different properties here. I can paint. I can make details. I can do a lot of things that I'm not going to get into right now. But what I want you to see is that essentially this is what it's showing it on the 3D model, and I can paint on the 3D model. But what it's actually doing, it's doing it on the texture. It's doing it on the UV space. This is what you actually put color on. Back in the day, we didn't have Substance Painter. We would go into Maya, and we would take all these UVs, and we would export them as a little picture, and we would go into Photoshop, and we would paint on it in Photoshop, and then we'd have to come back into Maya or into Unity or whichever program you're using the 3D model and put the color that we just made on the model. It was more complicated. You guys have the benefit of having Substance Painter as a tool. But what essentially you're doing in Substance Painter, you're still doing what you used to do in Photoshop. You're painting on the UV, but it's just very smartly transferring it to the 3D model, essentially making it so you can paint directly on the 3D model. But this is what actually comes out of Substance Painter. This is the information on the 2D version of your model that you then plug into different programs and make it appear on your guide. So let's do this actually. Let's export this nonsense that we just made. Don't worry about how I'm exporting it, as I keep saying. We don't want the face, we just want this. Yes, export. Where am I exporting it? Let's just put it on the desktop for now. Okay, that's done. And if I go to my desktop, you can see that it's exported a bunch of pictures here. And if I open up these pictures, you're going to see they are literally the colors in the sections. It's this view. It's exported different bits of information from this view. So we have a piece of information which is just about color. We have a piece of information which is about the, this one doesn't show it very well, but there's a piece of information that's about the actual 3D high resolution details. That's a piece of information that is a combination of information. This is showing where there's metallic, where there's roughness and shininess, etc. But without going into that, let's just worry about the color for now. We're going to cover all these other things another time. Let's just worry about it's put color in the positions of this view. So this is why I'm saying this view is important, because yes, in Substance Painter we paint on the 3D model, but we don't, Substance Painter isn't a game. It's not Unreal Engine, it's not Unity, it's not a game engine, it's not a video game. It's just a tool for painting. And what we get out of this tool is this information, this file. And this file we then send to the game. We put it in the game engine or even in Maya so you can see what we can see what we're doing. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to select my whole UV robot except for the face because that's a separate piece. And I'm going to give it a material. I'm going to hold right click and give it assign a favorite material, Lambert. And now it's got this little material that essentially can change the color of the object that I'm using. And I can change the color just to differentiate between different objects. I can make another like cube, and I can now right click, assign an existing material. So I can do this like Lambert 5 that I just made, which is going to affect, you know, every object that has that material. Or I can assign a new favorite material, assign favorite material, Lambert. I can give it a different name like new Lambert or whatever. And I can change this color different independently from the other one. It's on the top here in this attribute window. I'm going to call this yellow. And then I can grab this. I can assign the existing yellow. You get the idea. You can add materials in Maya to change the color so you can differentiate between assets. But I can also change it so that that color isn't just a color I pick, but it's actually a map. So let me click that little like checker box at the end here. Select I want a file instead. Choose the file I want. And I want the color. And click open. And you see it's done what we had here. It's put these colors on our asset. How has it done that, you ask? How do we have color on our object? Let's go back to the UV editor. And let's select our object. It's taken that image that we were painting here, this 2D, it's painting on our UVs here, remember? That's what I was saying. And it's taken that painting we've done in our UVs and taken it as a picture and made it into information. And when we put this picture on our model, this is why I'm telling you UVs are the thing that takes the texture. We put that picture into our model, and the model's 2D version, its UV version, picks it up. and then presents it in 3D space. And I can explain this even better by going here and see how we have red here, and this is our gray bit afterwards. Let's grab this out. What is this? This is this part. What is this part? It's around here. So let me just pull this UV thing outside of the red space. And you can see whatever the UV is overlapping, that is what we are going to see in the 3D space. So this is what UVs are for. UVs are for essentially painting on, because when we put an image under our UVs, that image is presented onto our 3D model. And that is the simple way to explain what UVs are actually doing. They're literally putting on, let me put this back where it was. They're literally showing what's underneath. They're showing the picture underneath. That's what UVs are doing, and that's why we make them for 3D models. Next, in the later sessions, we're going to explain more about how to make textures, how to make these images for our 3D models. We're going to explain how to use Substance Painter. We're going to explain what the correct sizes, everything, what the different kinds of files that Substance Painter is going to create are. Obviously, you see there's one for color, and there's other complicated ones. We're going to explain all of that. For now, I just want you to take away this. One, how to UV, which we've covered, and two, that your UVs are what decide, are essentially overlaying a picture which is presented onto your 3D model. And that is how we make objects get colored in games and stuff. So when all of you are asking, oh, how are we going to color our objects? When are we going to texture them? That's hard to answer because there are other steps. Because we haven't explained to you this whole process yet. So now you understand that you make a 3D object, you give it UVs, and then you texture it. And you can see that here I've got like even these little 3D details that we can create and all this stuff. All stuff we're going to go in the future. We're going to go into all that stuff in the future. Now we have just a little bit of time left. And the thing that I couldn't cover is what's the difference between a high resolution and a low resolution object. I haven't been able to cover that yet. And I apologize for that. We just don't have enough time. And I don't want to confuse you. But this bit about UVing, how to UV and what its purpose is the most important thing. That's the thing that I wanted you to understand. And what I'm actually going to do here, I'm going to delete these assets because I want to do it with this slightly more detailed one. And I'm going to go to export the textures again, just change a few of my settings. Again, don't worry what they are. 4. And let's do that again. Export. Excuse me again. Actually, let's change this to PBR metallic roughness. Yeah, let's do that. Just hide this. No, I don't want these. I want a different one. There, let's do it now. PBR metallic roughness, done. And now you're going to see we've got all these different maps here. And you can see this is the color that I was painting on the UVs. I just changed some settings so it's more clear to see. This is the color on our guy that we were doing. This is the 3D details that you saw that I was painting in as well, all these little lines. This is what this map does. It simulates the 3D details. And there are other maps that do other things like showing, this one isn't very useful, showing things that are metallic. None of it is metallic. There are loads of different maps. Let me just put this on. I don't want to go into those details. It's picked it up automatically, which is nice. It's just replaced it. But you can understand what it's doing. I just want you to really be able to get this concept. And if I put it over the wrong piece, see, this is why I was saying we're making the UVs first, then painting on the model in its UVs. And then when we export them, they're going to be perfectly in place because we're painting in exactly the right spaces, right? It's kind of neat. All right, I'm going to stop there because I don't want to make anyone confused. This has been the UV process and the purpose of using UVs. Little bit of showing you what Substance Painter is used for as well, just a little bit. Next week, we're going to be covering Substance Painter a bit more, and we're going to actually start teaching you how to use Substance Painter and how to start texturing your models. So I would really like by next week for you guys to have had, at best, your UVs completely finished, and at least all of your modeling, your detail modeling, completely finished. That is what I would like. If you do think you are ready to start UVing, don't start until you've had feedback from someone. Don't start until you've had feedback from someone in your feedback sessions. And if you really, really want to start UVing straight away and you think you're ready and you don't want to wait, send me a picture, send me a message. I'll look over it and I'll see whether you're ready for it. Okay, so that's it. Any questions? Is there any questions from anyone at the moment? How did I add in the 3D elements? What do you mean by that? The robotic elements, the line, and the character. Don't worry about how I'm adding the 3D details and all of that. I'm going to go through Substance Painter next week. But essentially, to say it very briefly, when you are painting and doing stuff, let me bring back the guy we had before. If I want to make this appear just on like this bit, like that, I'm adding this gray bit to the red bit. The gray bit right now just has the color, right? Gray color. But it also has all of these other parameters, like how rough and shiny it is, and also whether it's metallic, which right now it's not, and also height. And height defines whether it sticks out or goes in. So I was essentially painting in details using a brush. So I make a fill layer that has only height information, and then I paint where I want it to appear. That's a very general way to explain it. So any of you that have no idea what the hell Substance Painter is, this is probably going to go over your head. So don't worry about that. We're going to cover that another time. Any other questions before we finish? Is anyone massively confused? I'm going to write massively confused. So upvote that if you are in fact massively confused. Excellent. One person. Great. That's good. Out of 20 people, one person is okay. Oh, they've changed their mind. Okay, they're back. Which days are you on campus? Check your timetable. Check your timetables. I don't know if you have a session tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. I'm not actually supposed to be in your supervision session, so I won't know that information. Sometimes I'm just here and you guys happen to be here as well. I only know for certain my own lectures. Sawyer, are the first years in tomorrow or the day after tomorrow?
Friday.
Okay, you guys are in on Friday.
Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon, you guys are in. So yeah, if you guys want to really get started with UVing, or if you are really massively confused, send me a message afterwards, and we can chat. And actually, I'm going to stick around in here for about 5-10 minutes. So if you want to chat, we can. Any of you want to chat, we can do that as well. But I'm going to end it there thank you all for listening intently and joining the various calls and things that we were doing. And I hope you guys kind of get that. If you don't, kind of watch the video again, bit by bit, try and understand. And anyone that you stop, any of the supervisors, will be able to kind of explain this much more slowly and carefully to you, the specific bits that you don't get as well, myself included. So this is one of the fundamentals of 3D art, and you've just gotten your first taste of it. And at the end of next week, you'll know all of the stages apart from the game engine, so you should know exactly how the whole asset pipeline works, and there will be very little confusion left, I assure you. So we're almost there, which is really, really good. Okay, guys, have a nice afternoon, and I'll see you guys in the next session.